Yes, what's happening, people? What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video with your boy CJ from the Gunner's Corner. And in this video, we're just going to quickly be touching on and discussing something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, which is our injury news and our injury situation. Now, for a long time, you guys know that, players at this football club, even before Arteta was in charge, to be fair, we've had a long history with injury curses and injury issues, perhaps ruining our season, right? Going back to the days of Aaron Ramsey, if you guys remember the year that he broke through and he was scoring goals for fun, I think it was the 2013-14 season. Aaron Ramsey was, scoring goals left, right, and center in the Premier League. I think we were competing, at least in the first half of the season. We were contending on the top end of the table until Ramsey got injured, and then the rest of our season went downhill from there. He did come back later on in the season, and we did lift the FA Cup at the end of the 2014 season. But that injury obviously, screwed him throughout his time in that season at Arsenal in the 2013-14 season when he was on a tear. Santi Cazorla, famously under Arsene Wenger as well, you know, he was tearing it up playing central midfield, him and Coquelin, right? Remember that double pivot partnership in midfield? What a midfield that was. Coquelin and Santi Cazorla, mashing it up in midfield. Um, and Wenger deploying Santi in a deeper position. And then as he was playing well, balling out in that famous game at the Etihad, the last time we won at the Etihad, mind you, I think that was even 2015, if I'm not mistaken. Santi Cazorla, having a really good season, playing in a deeper position in midfield, and then Santi goes and gets injured. And I also believe that that was the start of a bit of a downfall in our turn of form that season as well, when we were looking really, really good. And Santi obviously never came back as the same player. He had his injury issues. I think they were in his legs or Achilles or knees, if I'm not mistaken. Anywhere in the leg area on Santi, and he, instead he had to retire or not retire. I should say he had to leave Arsenal Football Club because he just wasn't the same player. Obviously continued his career in back in Spain and has done well to play, at the latter stages. But yeah, that Santi Cazorla getting injured at Arsenal, was a misfortune for us, misfortune for him. When you think what could have been with him at Arsenal when he if he had stayed fit. Abu Dhabi, we all know about Abu Dhabi. Van Persie had his injury issues. So on and so forth. Fabregas at one point in time when things are looking promising for us. And the problem with all these injuries that we get at Arsenal Football Club is when they come at a time where, you know, we're looking like we're promising as a team. Eduardo, geez, do we have to go back to that? 2018? 2018, sorry, 2008, I believe it was. Birmingham away. That horrible leg break, that horrific leg break. If you've been supporting Arsenal long enough, you'll remember that time and period where Eduardo suffered a horrible tackle from the Birmingham player, broke his leg, and that was similarly at a time where we were, in a title race. I believe it was February of that year, 2008. Could even be 2007. Anyways, 2008, 2007, around that time period. But we all know what I'm talking about. We were in a title race. And then, Eduardo gets injured in that game, breaks his leg, horrible tackle on him. And then it seemed to, ruin the spirits, the morale of the team for the rest of our season. And it seemed to derail us. Famously, at the end of that game, we saw Gallas crying on the pitch, wearing the captain's armband, which is a joke. Um, we tied that game 2-2 when we were in a winning position. And it seemed to have derailed the rest of our campaign. So fast forward to 2026, we've seen injuries. If you've done your history in Arsenal Football Club, we've seen injuries here ruin seasons for us, ruin, title charges, ruin, form of the team and the individual player as well. It's really been a thing for us and it's been a problem for us. And that has carried on post-Wenger even to Mikel Arteta, right? Saliba in 22-23 season. Many say that that was the season and the injury that ruined our title push that year, you know? Um, so there's just I could go on and on and on about players from under Wenger, players under Arteta, even Thomas Rosicky under Wenger. You can just go on and on. Thomas Vermaelen, just whether they're injury prone players, whether they're players that have been overplayed, and it's just it's sad, man. It's sad, and I want to touch on the overplayed thing because, like I said, fast forward to 2026, right? You can name players under this manager, Mikel Arteta, who have been injury prone as well. The likes of Thomas Partey, the likes of in this current squad, Calafiori, before him Zinchenko, and then in the transition from Emery to Arteta, Kieran Tierney, right? It just injuries is just something that's attached to this football club. So what does that leave us? That leaves us talking about the likes of Yuri and Timber. That's what we need to discuss. That's what I want to talk about right now in this moment in time. Before I get into it, ladies and gentlemen, please remember to like and subscribe. As I always say, it really, really does help us out. Hype the video as well. That's a new thing that they're doing on YouTube these days is being able to hype videos. So if you could hype the video as well as liking and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, that would be really, really appreciated. Arsenal's in a good moment. We're in a good mood. We just come off the back of beating Fulham 3-0 in the Premier League. Attention's turned to the Champions League. And so yeah, with the vibe is good at the moment. The energy is high. So like and subscribe for us and just help out the Arsenal community. We're all in a good moment, so let's ride this wave. But yeah, I mean something that's not so great for Arsenal Football Club is obviously the injuries, as I keep alluding to. And I'm doing this video now off the back of Arteta's press conference ahead of the game tomorrow, the semifinal, the massive game at the Emirates Stadium against Atletico Madrid, semifinals of the Champions League. We now have a bit more information on team news. I say a bit more information. I mean, not most of us were expecting the news, and the news is that the big headline is that the manager has admitted, uncharacteristically so, admitted that both Kai Havertz and Odegaard are fit and available apparently for the squad tomorrow. So that gives us great options, right? That gives us additional squad depth and options off the bench or from the start with whatever he elects and chooses to do. That's fantastic for us, right? But the likes of Yuri and Timber is still out, and so is Mikel Merino, as we know. The Timber thing is really, really worrying, and you know, Arsenal and these injuries are just going to kill me and kill us as fans and as a club. It's just, we're our own worst enemy when it comes to injuries, right? We will kill ourselves. We will shoot ourselves in the foot when it comes to injuries. Some of the times you believe that it sounds like excuses when we've lost games in the past or lost finals in the past or had our seasons derailed from injuries. You can blame injuries. It could sound like an excuse, but a lot of the times it is genuine. It's just an honest fact that when you have players injured and out of your squad, you're not going to be as good of a team as if those players were fit. Goes for any sport, right? Not just football, any sport. If you don't have your best players available, you're not going to be as good of a team, and that can either make or break your seasons, or a cup final. And say what we want about Tottenham Hotspur, but the same can be said for them, right? If all those players are fit, Madison, Kulusevski, Kudus, throughout the course of the campaign, I don't think they're in a relegation battle at all, right? So it's just one of those things. So, bringing it back to Arsenal for a second here, I don't want, and we don't want to be in a position again where injuries are the thing that cost us and screw us, and it's going to be the death of me, honestly. Like these injuries are going to give me a headache, a heart attack. I'm going to have to go see my doctor and just get some therapy in it because I will be damned if injuries again ruin Arsenal's season from what is potentially going to be, success and glory for us. We're in the semifinals of the Champions League. We're top of the league in the Premier League. At the time of recording, Everton is playing Man City. We're in a great moment, man. And we will the only thing that's going to screw Arsenal, I believe, is ourselves. Injuries will be the thing. Otherwise, I fully believe that we can go on and do what we need to do this season, truly. And so, my fear with on the in the injury front in this case is Yuri and Timber. Right now we have most of our squad available, right? Knock on wood and all that stuff. But the Yuri and Timber thing, is concerning me. And the fact that, my main concern around that is the fact that, there's lack of transparency from the manager, from Arteta around Timber's injury. And a lot of that, a lot of my anxiety, a lot of my fears, a lot of my worries is just like, you know, Arteta, tell us what's going on. Like, be honest here for a second, right? Like, tell us what's going on with Timber. Um, we want to know. We deserve to know as fans. He was pressed previously, Arteta, a couple press conferences ago, especially when he was really under the caution, really under pressure. I think it was off the back of us losing to Man City a few weeks ago at the Etihad. He was asked in press conferences, right? Like, and this is when Saka was unavailable. He was asked by the reporters and the journalists, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but basically just kind of questioning Arteta on, are you going to give us more clarity on the injury front? Like why are we in the dark a lot of the time when it comes to these injuries? Sometimes, he'll say that, a player is, I don't know, close to returning or days away, a matter of days, a matter of weeks. Um, and before you know it, the player is it's been a month or 2 months and the player's still not back. And, 2 months ago, you told us it's going to be a matter of days, right? Ahead of the EFL Cup final against Man City, you know, we seen photos of Timber in training. Those photos were put out, and now I understand that the manager Arteta will put these things out, right, to kind of throw off the opposition, um, keep them guessing, keep them wondering what the team news is looking like. I mean, how often do those things really work? You have to do the fact checking and the science on behind, how much of a psychological edge does that actually give to a manager, an opposing manager. Um, but I mean, yeah, but it's just like, you know, c- I don't know, man. I don't believe. I think the fans deserve a little bit more transparency that's going to help your relationship with the fans. And I believe, you know, whilst you want to, psych out your opponent and keep them guessing on the team news and the team lineup, again, just be a little bit more transparent. I mean, to go and say, at that moment in time, oh yeah, Timber's going to be out a matter of days. And then like, it's been a couple months later and we still haven't seen him. Give us a little bit more information than, oh yeah, Timber is out. Because that's what the response was today in the press conference. He he told the reporter who asked him, on the team news, all he said was that Timber is out. And he, that's what he said still. Um, so we were told Timber is out 2 weeks ago. We were told Timber is out last press conference. We were told Timber is out last month. Give us a little bit more transparency is all I want to know, right? Has there been a setback? Manage the expectation because I'm going to keep being hopeful and thinking that okay, Timber can be back for the next game because you keep hinting on the fact that it's close, he's close, he's close. But then every press conference comes around and again, oh yeah, Timber is still out, but why is he out? What's the reason why he's out? Like, give me a little bit more something as a fan to work with. Give us as fans something more to work with. These things make a difference, right? We want to know what's going on. I think we have the right to know what's going on. It helps build up excitement, ahead of match days, and that's what you call for, right? Arteta as a manager, you call for, fans to bring their noise and bring their energy. But sometimes if you're not being honest with us in press conferences about what's happening with the team and who's available and what's not. That can affect the atmosphere. That can affect excitement levels, right? Think, your best players like Bukayo Saka's in that. And for a while he was doing it with Saka. We weren't being told for a while what's going on and what his injury was. We were just told that Saka's out. And oftentimes when he leaves it quiet, it's a more serious injury, right? But again, think about, and these are extreme levels, but Barcelona's, Real Madrid's, or the time that Messi and Ronaldo were playing, or even now, Vinny, Mbappe, you mean Lamine Yamal. When fans go to games, right? If you're a paying customer, your excitement levels comes from knowing whether or not you're going to see certain players. You want to see certain players. And if you're not being told what's happening with them, or if you're in the dark about what's happening with them, that could change your match day experience or your excitement levels, or even whether or not you're gonna, buy your ticket to come watch your a team play or not because you want to see certain players or young fans, right? Parents who take their young children to games. Those young children may idolize and look up to Mbappe's, Vinny's, um, Saka's in the case of Arsenal, right? Your Saka's, and if Saka's not playing, right, that could make or break whether or not fans either go to a game, don't go to a game. Again, their match day experience because you're thinking or being told based on maybe some false optimism that Saka could be in the team from the press conference, but then you show up on match day as a fan in the stadium and Saka's not there, and all of a sudden your levels drop, right? So I think all that to say, I think the manager owes it to fans a little bit to have a little bit more transparency. And Arteta hasn't always been like that, and he hasn't always done that, and that has been a problem for a lot of fans. And that's a lot of fans had a little bit of beef with Arteta for that reason. Because it's like he's not being transparent with us. We don't know what's going on. And again, that can help, sort of shape your match day experience, especially for match going fans. And you will ask for a lot from us as fans when we go to games. Well, we need a little bit more in return from you. So in the case of Yuri and Timber, I just want to know how long he's going to be out for. I want to have an idea. Was there a setback? Is it more serious than what was first thought? Because we were told 2 months ago that it was just a matter of days, right? And Timber is a player who can really make a massive difference to our season. If we get to somehow, and hopefully this is the case, we get to a Champions League final, let's say, and we're playing a Bayern Munich or we're playing a PSG. Look who plays left wing for both of those clubs. For PSG, it's Kvara Kvaratskhelia. For Bayern Munich, it's Luis Diaz. I do not want either of those players going up against a Ben White or a Christian Mascara, respectfully. In a cup final, you want your best players playing. We love Mascara, we love Ben White, both part of our squad. They're not, um, you know, of the level at this moment in time of as right backs you want starting in a final to go up against the best left wingers forwards in the world. Timber is our starting right back. He's our main man through and through at right back. He's proved it that he's the best in that position for us, and so you want him ready and available for a cup final, you know? And the fact that, we're not there yet, right? But I'm just looking, I'm thinking ahead, I'm looking ahead, like I just wonder how long this is going to go on for. And mind you, we have Premier League games to come as well, right? So I just want to know how long should we expect that Timber's going to be out for the whole season? Is that the stage that we're at? So, and I think, do you know why, it's a little bit frustrating as well, I think from a fan's point of view, is also the fact that, the least you can give us is transparency because a lot of the injuries that Arsenal Football Club have and get, at least this iteration of Arsenal Football Club under Arteta, a lot of us believe it's because of, the mismanagement of players, right? These muscular injuries, it cannot be a coincidence that, there's only so much we can say, woe is me, we're unlucky with injuries, this, and that. At some point, you got to look to the root problem as to why we're picking up so many injuries, right? So the question is, are certain players being overplayed? Because again, you can only feel sorry for yourself so much when you're picking up injuries, right? You have to look at as to why. You have to maybe try and solve those internal problems first and say, okay, why are so many of my players picking up muscular injuries? Last season, 2024-25 season, we finished second but fell way behind Liverpool in the title race. A lot of people are trying to give that an excuse to say, oh, hey, okay, well, we had so many injuries, so, we can, maybe give that season a pass. If everyone was fully fit, maybe we can go on and push and win the title and win the league. But why was so many people unfit? Why did we have so many injuries last season? Why did we have so many muscular injuries last season? Saka needed an operation on his hamstring. Kai Havertz the same. I think Gabriel the same. Gabriel Martinelli didn't necessarily require an operation, but at one point in time in the second half of last season, he had a hamstring injury. I think it was a hamstring pull that kept him out for a number of weeks. So why were all these and those are just a few, right? There's many more injuries last season. Why are so many of these players picking up those sort of muscular injuries? That carried on into this season, mind you. Players picking up injuries, players picking up muscular injuries. Um, why is that happening? Are players being overworked in training? Are they working too hard, even maybe on the pitch? Are they getting too many minutes? Working too hard on the pitch in the sense that, is our pressing game too much for certain players? For us, are we putting those same level of, you know, pressing or I don't know, work rate in training and then putting that into the game, 3, 4 days later? Maybe the rest and recovery from training to game isn't enough. Maybe in training when you have a big game on the weekend, certain weeks, certain time periods, certain points in the season, you take training a little bit more lightly. You do more of a lighter session. I'm no manager, but hey, like last season, apparently Kai Havertz got injured in Dubai doing a pressing drill. To Dubai, you go to, for I don't know, warm weather training, a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of change of scenery when you have a gap in the season, light training sessions. How do you go to Dubai and get injured in training and mash up in your hamstring and completely pull your hamstring and tear your hamstring or whatever it was? And Kai Havertz was out for, majority of the rest of the season for that point. We lost a big player at that point in time. Before that, he was being overplayed. You can see games last season. I remember a game Fulham, not Fulham, Wolves away last season, where at the end of that game we had won 1-0, but Kai Havertz collapsed on the ground at the end of that game from exhaustion, fatigue, you know, being overworked. We had no other strikers. We didn't do anything in January last year, 2025. We had no other strikers. Kai Havertz was the one playing there, running into the ground. It's like, so we're running players into the ground at certain times, and I believe you know, we've done the same with Timber this season. A groin injury he has, at the moment. Is that due to overplaying? You'd have to think yes. I mean, the guy came back from an ACL operation 2 years ago, and 2 years on, he's played so much football. Where when you come back from that sort of ACL operation, in a player in his position as a fullback that requires so much work, so much demand, so much running in the Premier League, you need to manage minutes better. You need to rotate him a little bit more. He can't be playing 90 minutes game in, game out in 40 plus games a season, 2 years in a row after an ACL injury that required an operation. He needed to be managed better. More minutes needed to be managed for him. Previous to Timber, Ben White was the same. Ben White's now come back and he's not the same player, Ben White, because of the injuries. And I don't blame excuse me, I don't blame Ben White alone for the injuries that he's faced and now therefore the lack of form that he's currently in due to those injuries. Ben White was a player that was run into the ground in the 23-24 season and the 22-23 season, if I'm not mistaken, but especially 23-24 when, we had majority of our players fit that season. But Ben White played week in, week out, 90 minutes, again, as a fullback in Arteta system in the Premier League. Um, it's a very demanding position, very demanding position. fullback in any team at the top level is difficult nowadays because you're expected to get forward and defend as well. But again, in Arteta's teams, where he demands so much of us and so much of the players, I should say, in terms of, pressing, in terms of recovery, in terms of support up the pitch, in terms of dropping back quickly and getting into defensive shape. Ben White, mind you, this guy was a guy who was a center back naturally, but he's transitioned to a fullback and good on him. Played pretty much all of that season and beyond when he was, being ran into the ground. And apparently halfway through, or at least for 4 or 5 months, he was carrying a big injury, which, carried on into the 24-25 season. And as we know, he was out for a significant period of time because he had operations done on him to solve the severity of the injuries that he had. So he was playing in the 23-24 season with injury for months. And, at the end of that season, going into the new season, in that summer, by mind you, in the 2024 summer, and nothing was done in terms of an operation for him. We decided not to operate on him then. But going into the 24-25 season, we all of a sudden decided, a couple months in, okay, maybe Ben White's going to need some operations here. He's going to need some treatment here, which then meant that we had to play, Timber more than what he should have been playing off the back of an ACL injury. You see what I'm saying? So this is the mismanagement that I'm talking about, right? Of players. Um, this season, we've seen it with Declan Rice and we've seen it with Zubimendi. Both of those players have been played a significant amount of minutes all season long, and I don't want us to run into those same issues with them. All season long, those two have been playing heavy, heavy minutes in on all fronts, and we haven't rotated enough in those positions for them. We only now used in game week 35 Miles Lewis Skelly. We finally used him in midfield. You know, the likes of Zubimendi and Declan Rice are going to go and play a World Cup beyond this club season. So they're going to go play a World Cup and then come back next season and then expect to play and go again the whole campaign. Like it's a lot, you know. Bukayo Saka, that's the last big one I'll talk about. Bukayo Saka's been run into the ground for the last 4, 5, 6 years since he's come to the first team. At his age, when he broke into the team with the weight of his shoulders that were on him at the time when the team was in turmoil, he was the one shining light. And at 18, 19 years old, he's carrying this football club when we're transitioning and trying to get back on our feet. So he's carrying us mentally and physically with the amount of games that he's had to play under Arteta. Arteta has definitely, and most of us can agree on this, Arteta has definitely overplayed Bukayo Saka since he's come into this football club as a manager. Saka has had numerous games, and this goes for a lot of players, but Saka has had numerous games where he could have been taken off earlier in the match, or he didn't even need to come on when you're playing, you know, I don't know, Portsmouth away in the FA Cup first round. These types of games where Saka's coming on, or even in the squad, or starting and playing in these types of games, or playing 90 minutes when we're 4-0 up at home to, I don't know, Fulham. Like, you know what I mean? I'm making up games here, but you see what I'm saying? Like it wasn't exactly 4-0 against Fulham. I think something similar though. We've had these kind of games. Bournemouth away. Saka's playing 80 plus minutes, 90 minutes when we're 4-0 up against Bournemouth away. I remember a couple seasons ago. Like it's these kind of things. And this is what Pep Guardiola is so good at, the management of players, right? Managing players, managing their minutes. I think I've said this in a previous video. Kevin De Bruyne, right? What Pep does to get his teams fit and ready for the business end of the season is your likes of Kevin De Bruyne will not play much in the first half of whatever campaign it is, right? So say it's, I don't know, the 23-24 season. Um, I remember this one specifically. This is obviously when City went on a mad tear towards the end of the season and pipped us to the league title. You know, these seasons there, Kevin De Bruyne is not playing, 90 minutes week in, week out from, August until May. You know what I mean? Kevin De Bruyne's minutes are being managed. It's, the first few months of the season, he's on the bench or he's, coming off the bench, being eased into games or being taken off early. And he didn't necessarily always like it, De Bruyne. But Pep has managed to manage these players so much so for them to understand eventually this is going to be worth your while and it's going to be beneficial. And then towards the back end of the season, right? Because Pep knows he's going to be there in March, April, May. So when it comes to the back end of the season, right? Kevin De Bruyne, you're now in the team week in, week out, and you're fresh and you're ready to go because you weren't playing 90 minutes week in, week out against Port Vale at home in September or October in the first round of the Carabao Cup. Your minutes are being managed so much so that, you're now ready for the business end of the season. And when the business end of the season comes around, you're not coming out of the team. You're starting week in, week out, so long as you're fit and available. And that's the kind of stuff Arteta needs to do. So well done getting us to this position, right? We're competing on all fronts in April and May, but it's come at the expense of a lot of our players in the red zone. your Rice, your Zubimendis, your Timbers, because a lot of those players have played heavy minutes up to this point in the season without, being rotated throughout. We could have brought in Miles Skelly a lot more and a lot earlier in midfield this season when he hasn't been playing at left back. So put Miles in midfield where he naturally plays. Norgard, he's a midfielder that was brought in last summer. You bought him. Why don't you trust him? That was a player you invested in. Play him more. Take Rice off in the 80th minute when we are 2 or 3 nil up. Take Zubimendi off in, the 80th minute, 75th minute. When we're 2 or 3 nil up in at the Emirates or whatever the case may be. Like this the management. I think there was one game before I continue, one game at Spurs. You know, um, earlier this a couple months ago, the North London Derby where we won away. Gyökeres scored as they scored. We have 5 subs for a reason in the Premier League. With the squad that we have, there's no reason why we cannot use all 5 substitutes or should not use all 5 substitutes. And in the game, against Spurs a couple months ago at their ground when we beat them, I believe we did not use all 5 subs in that game. And it's not the first time that's happened, but we didn't use all 5 substitutes in that game, right? And we were up. What was the final score? I don't even remember now. We battered them though. 3-0, 4-0, whatever it was. You're up 3-4-0 against Spurs. That game is done in the second half. There's no reason why we should have spare subs. Use all 5 of your substitutions. Get players off that need rest, that need rotation, that need, you know, to have their load managed. Why would we not? Why would we ever go into any game with the squad that we have, right? People said we had the best squad at the beginning of the season. Why would we ever therefore go into any game and not use all 5 subs, especially in games where the game is won and we're comfortable and we're up by a couple of goal margin? You need to use all your squad at that point. We should never finish games when we're up that comfortably and not have used all 5 of our substitutions that have been granted to us by the Premier League with the grace and the privilege to now be able to use all 5 subs. They should always be used. We should never finish a game not using all 5 of our substitutions with the squad that we have. Rotate these players. There's no reason for Saka, Rice, Zubimendi, Timber to be playing 90 minutes when we're 3-4 nil up and the game is won. And Timber has definitely overplayed minutes wise this season, right? We've had no real rotation. Ben White has been struggling for fitness. Timber has been overused from the beginning of the season up until he picked up that injury against Everton a couple months ago. I think it was back end of March. You know, played from the beginning till then, right? So that's what August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, 7, 8 months. Timber has pretty much been fit and available and been again overused, overplayed at times where he could have taken off, at times where he could have been rested even or not played, come off the bench. We've had Christian Mascara, we've had other solutions that you can look to do, but it's up to him, up to the manager, right? Pep finds these solutions. So as a manager who's being paid what 15 mil a season or whatever crazy amount that he's being paid, Arteta, one of the highest paid managers in the world, second highest maybe in the Premier League. This is your job. It's not only the tactics, it's not only the on-field stuff, it's the management of players, right? And one thing Arteta definitely needs to improve on is managing his players, whether it's managing their mental emotions, their physical capabilities, and their minutes on the pitch. You want them fit for these times. You have to think, you have to foreshadow and think to the future. That's what big managers at big clubs do. You have to think about the duration and the marathon of the campaign. You can't just think about the here and now, right? Manage these players better. And that's something we want to see going forward if he is going to be the manager going into next season. Because I think with the Timber thing, like I said, I think it's cost us. He's played many games and at times where he could have and should have been taken off a lot earlier as Timber, right? Or played in games where maybe he didn't need to play. Maybe we could have rotated better and you could have found an alternative solution. So listen, with Timber, I hope he comes back in some capacity towards the end of the season. Because like I said, we're gonna need him if we get to a Champions League final, or just for the rest of the Premier League campaign for our title push. Because every one of those Premier League games that we have left, and I think there's 3 of them, they're all cup finals. So we need our best players available for this run in. And I pray and I hope that Timber comes back soon. We are going to need him. Um, but listen, let's stick to the positives now. Let's end on a positive. Again, we have Champions League semifinal tomorrow against Atletico Madrid. Um, Come on, you Gunners. Let's get behind the boys. We should, have enough still to get to the final, and we keep rolling on and hope that we get, Timber's back fit and available soon. We hope we get more transparency from the manager, in the press conferences about what's going on with Timber and when we can expect to see him again. But until then, we just gotta again to just hope, pray, and and back the boys. And we're gonna have a big game ahead of us tomorrow in that semifinal. And let's hope that we can come through it unscathed and on the other side and get ready for Budapest and get ready for the cup final. Please, I hope, this has got to be the time. I'm wearing this kit 20 years ago. We wore this kit that season in the 2025-26 season. We wore this kit in the well, I say we wore it in the Champions League final. We actually wore the away kit. We wore the yellow kit in the Champions League final in 2006. Sorry, did I say 2026? 2006. So the 2005, 2006 season when we were in the Champions League final last and we lost to Barcelona. This was our home kit in that season. We wore the yellow kit in the final, but this was our home kit in that season when we went to the our last Champions League final in 2006. So listen, 20 years on, 20 years later, let's get back to another Champions League final. And obviously, hopefully we can win it. But let's get there first and then we'll talk about what happens then. Right? So listen, ladies and gentlemen, this has been CJ from the Gunners Corner. Um, Please like and subscribe, as I always say. Hype the video. We're coming with the content quite regularly for you guys, and just fans talking to fans. That's all we are here. So again, this has been CJ talking to the Gunners Corner. Sorry, CJ from the Gunners Corner, talking to you guys and having a little bit of a therapy session with you guys on the Arsenal injury situation at the moment, the likes of Yuri and Timber, what's going on with him. Hopefully, we have enough to get through. But yeah, we will be here. We will be there, and we will be everywhere. So see you guys on the next one. Take care. Up the Arsenal. Later, people. Bye bye.